David Bird at dbch.co.uk here. I want to talk to you about another anxiety busting technique that I use with my clients. And this one's called tapping, or EFT, which is short for emotional freedom technique. Now, this is probably one of my favorite kind of self-management techniques for dealing with difficult feelings. And that's because it's really quite effective. Now, some of the imagination techniques that I talked about, like spinning and the shapeshifter, those are great because they're covert. And yet sometimes when we're really overwhelmed by feelings or difficult thoughts or whatever, they can be a bit of a challenge to do. And this is great when you've got something that's on your mind or some feeling that's you can't do anything else but kind of focus on that. This is great for that because that's all you need to do while you're doing this process. To mention as well, this is not the pure way of doing tapping. This is the way that I do it. If you're interested in kind of where this came from, you want to look up a guy called Gary Craig. I don't do it the way he does it. And I add some different bits into it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to talk you through the basic pattern, the tapping pattern. And then I'm going to talk to you, then I'll walk you through the process, and then I'll talk about some tips and tricks and like some covert ways of using it. So before we get started on that though, one thing to talk about is like how this works, and that's kind of debated. So some people will say that it's to do with releasing energy through the energy meridians because of where we tap. Other people will say that it's to do with bilateral brain stimulation, so moving attention across the brain. Other people will say it's just more of a distraction technique. I don't know which is true, or whether it's any of them or none of them at all. I just use it because it works. So I'd encourage you to have a go at it and just see if it works for you. So here's the basic pattern. We just take 2 fingers. I mean, you can take as many fingers as you want really, but I find it's comfortable to use 2. And just tap along with me so you can get the pattern in the muscle. So it's top of the head. Here. And then it's side of the eye, sort of between your nose and eyebrow, I guess. Other side of the eye, so the bone just outside the eye socket. Underneath the eye, the bone just underneath the eye socket. Top lip, or between your nose and your top lip really. And bottom lip, or really it's between the bottom lip and your chin, I guess. And then back up again, top lip. Underneath the eye. Side of the eye. Other side of the eye. Top of the head. A good way I find to think about it is it's like top of the head and then a question mark going all the way around. Top of the head and a question mark. Now, there's a few things to consider here. One is placement doesn't have to be precise. If you're kind of moving around a bit, that's okay. Also, some people do the kind of top of the head. They do it more here rather than here. Again, play with it, see what works for you. The pressure that you use. For me, the pressure is just that you can feel it. So if it's too light, you won't feel it, but then you probably wouldn't be touching your head if it was too light. And you don't need to do it so hard that you knock yourself out. You just need to be able to feel it and know that you can feel the tapping. In terms of the speed of the tap, I would say find what works for you. You don't want to do it so slow that it's not really, it needs to have momentum, but you don't want to do it so fast that it's difficult or that you have to really think about it. Some people do it at this kind of speed though, and that's okay. I tend to do it a bit faster. Also, speed of moving between the points. For me, the rule of thumb is you just need to keep moving. So when you're doing the whole thing, you just need to really have enough conscious attention on what you're doing to keep moving through the points, because we'll be doing some other stuff with it. So it's about being able to hold enough attention on this part of it that you're able to keep moving through the points. Okay, what you don't want to do, essentially, is you don't want to be drifting off into space and doing this, because then that's not the process, not the way that I do it anyway. Okay, that's the basic pattern. So, assuming we're going to be working with anxiety, the first question is, do you feel anxious or have worry now? If you do, we can work with that. If you don't, just let your mind drift back, maybe over the last couple of days, couple of weeks, and just see if you can connect with a time where you felt those anxious feelings. It doesn't have to be a time that you were really, really panicked, just a time where you can feel those feelings now. So as you connect with that time or that worry, that anxiety, whatever it is for you, what we'll ask is, if there was somewhere in your body you felt that feeling strongest, where would that be? If there was somewhere in your body you felt that feeling strongest, where would that be? Now, for some people, that'll come up very quickly. They'll realize it's in their chest or their stomach. For others of you, you might just say, well, I'm not sure. It's worth asking the question and just seeing if you can locate it. If you really can't, don't get hung up on it. As long as you're aware of, as long as you can say, yeah, I definitely feel anxious, or I do feel those feelings, just run with that. So once you've got that, well, let's assume the feelings in your stomach. What you need to do is just put your attention on that feeling, or whatever it is about your experience that lets you know you're feeling that feeling. And with your attention on that, just begin to tap through the points. So you're holding your attention on that anxiety and where you feel that anxiety, and holding some attention on the tapping. And notice as you do what happens to that anxiety, to the intensity of that feeling as it begins to come down. Okay? Now, as you do that, the other thing that you'll want to do as you're tapping through is just begin to be aware of what it is that comes to mind. Okay, as you begin to put your attention on the feeling, be aware of what it is that comes to mind. And just sit with that. Just be there with what comes to mind. Now, it might be something quite current that comes up. Or you might find that your mind connects to an older memory. Or maybe it starts with something more current, and then at some point it shoots back to an older memory. Whatever comes to mind, just be there with that. Because often what comes to mind, especially if it goes back to something else, can be connected with what creates that feeling and is creating that anxiety or that feeling in the now. You'll know that if it goes back, you might even get a sense or a feeling of that, that is connected because, and you'll get a sense of it. What you don't want to do, if something comes up to mind, don't push it away, don't resist it. Be there with it. And just notice what happens. As you be there with it, notice what happens as you continue to tap through. Because quite often, the memory, whatever it is that comes up, begins to shift and change. And you might be surprised about the changes that happen there and what that does to the feeling. So 3 things to have in mind when you're doing this. It's the focusing on the feeling and where you feel it in your body. Focusing on tapping through those points. And focusing on what it is that comes to mind and allowing that to be there. And to just almost follow your attention with that and just tap on whatever comes up. And just notice what happens to the intensity of that feeling as it continues to come down. Okay? Now, on a good day, you'll have that difficult feeling, you'll start tapping, and you'll bring it all the way down, the feeling will disappear. On a not so good day, you'll just take the edge off. You can also begin to combine some of these techniques. So you can, once you can do the tapping, you can start to belly breathe at the same time, like the 7-11 breathing. Now, you don't have to do the whole counting at the same time and imagining the long thin tube and the balloon, but just belly breathing, just making sure you take deep breaths into your belly rather than breathing high in the chest, in addition with tapping, can be really beneficial. You might find as well that you might start tapping, say if it's a really overwhelming feeling, start tapping till it comes down and is more manageable, and then you might take the rest of it and do one of the imagination techniques. So you might be able to say, okay, now it's come down a bit. If this feeling had a shape, what shape would that be? And maybe do the shape shift or a spinning or something. The covert ones, that's right. So other ways you can do this, is obviously tapping. Most people aren't comfortable necessarily to do this on the bus or something like this. But it is a lot easier to do something like this on the bus, to just sit there with one finger and just tap between 2 points. You can try playing with this. And again, you might think, well, why would this work? But I would suggest you practice, have a go, try it out. You might be surprised at just how effective it is. The other one I do sometimes is underneath your collarbones here, there's kind of like a sore bit. I sometimes tap between these. Now you can do this kind of thing. I find it more effective personally to move one between the other. Again, play with it yourself. You can do the same on your knees. You can tap on the just behind your knees on the soft bit there, and try tapping kind of one side, like as if this was your knees. You can tap like that. You might do that kind of thing as well. Again, play with it, see what works for you. Okay, if you've got any questions about this, just stick a comment in the comments box below, or feel free to send me an email on my website at dbch.co.uk. There's a form there. See you soon.